Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard. I went from being a lawyer and partner at one of the largest firms in America to becoming an online personality and successful entrepreneur. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your health and personal life. So, how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you chase joy while achieving success? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back to Hustle and Flow. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and we are on episode 240. And today I have special guest, Olivia Hill. She serves on our Nashville Metro Council at large, and she is the first trans woman elected in the state of Tennessee history. She is a U.S. Navy combat veteran, an author, and a public speaker. And Olivia, I am just so delighted to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me on here. It's so good to be here and have a conversation with you and to just be here.
So I think my first question, mostly because I wanted to go into politics myself as a child, but then quickly decided I actually did not. What made you want to go into politics? What made you decide it is time for me to run?
I'll try to give you the shortest possible answer of that is when I transitioned, one of the things that rocked my world the most was the loss of my white male privilege that I had no idea that I possessed until it went away. And it went away in a switch. And so I started standing up and fighting for women's rights. I joined HRC, Human Rights Campaign, and I got on their steering committee. I got on their governor's board, and I started just showing up to everything and trying all I could to stand up for women's rights. And I got so involved that they invited me to DC to their annual convention in March of 2022, right during Cherry Blossom Festival, which is beautiful. You ever get the opportunity to go to DC, it's just gorgeous. And one of the first speakers Friday was Danica Rome, which is the first trans woman ever elected in the South. And she got up and spoke and started talking about things, got everybody all fired up. And then there's a microphone up front, and she's like, if anybody has any questions, I'll answer any questions. And I'm like, oh, when am I ever going to get an opportunity to speak to one of my heroes, Danica Rome? And so I scurried up to their microphone and I said, Danica, my name's Olivia Hill. I'm a trans woman from Nashville, Tennessee, and I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for blazing a trail for so many trans folks like me to come in behind you and be able to be here to help folks like you stay elected and stuff like that. And she just put her hand up and stopped me. And I was like, oh, my hero just stopped me from talking in front of at least 1,000 people. And she goes, come here, Olivia. She calls me up on stage and she gives me this great big bear hug. And she said, Olivia, if you want to make a difference, don't help elected officials become one. And I'm like, I don't know anything about politics. And she grabbed me by the arm and spun me around and faced me to the crowd. And she's like, Olivia Hill, Nashville, Tennessee's next politician. And I'm like, what? And so, so I finished the weekend up. I came back home and I just started trying to figure out what to do and what to run for. It was right in the middle of the judges race. And so I started going to all the judge fundraisers and I started meeting with all the judges and all the field people and the campaign people and the people that are doing the work and the door knockers and the volunteers. And I just started asking a lot of questions. And the one thing that I learned most about politics is politicians are just fixers. And that's all they are. If you've got a pothole or taxes or whatever your problem is, the politician is there for them to call you and get you to fix their problem. And once I kind of put that little piece together, I thought, well, I can do that. I've worked in a power plant for 40 years. So that's all I've done is fix stuff. So I can handle this. And so that's kind of where I'm at. Sorry, that was the shortest answer I could give, but it's how it happened.
That is so powerful. And I feel like so many of us feel a bit powerless right now and feel as though there isn't a difference that we can make. And I think that story is very powerful and really exemplifies how, even if we don't have experience or knowledge about what we think politics means, that we can still step up.
Yes.
If it's needed. What would you say to those? Because I was going to say, what would you say to anyone who's thinking, because of course, this listener base is from all over the country, some even international. I was going to say, like, what would you tell them if they were thinking about it, but you weren't even thinking about it?
No. And what I have learned is a lot of people always go to the presidential election and they let all the others fall through the cracks.
Mm,
The biggest elections out there are all our local politics. So if you want to decide who runs your school board, to decide what is in school, what the teachers get paid and how what kind of curriculum there is, then you vote for your school board. If you care about your taxes, you vote for your mayor. If you care about your roads being fixed, you vote for your city council. If you want the right judges to give people a chance and really go through life and who have made a mistake and not just throw everybody in jail, then you vote for the right judge. But it's all of the local politics that makes so much more important impact on you locally than a U.S. Senate, Congress, or the president. Sure,
hmm
they create some of the laws and stuff, but they don't normally affect whether the pothole down the street gets fixed or what your property taxes are going to be or how your school board's going to look. So those are
Yeah.
more important, and those are the folks that don't normally vote. They don't go to
hmm
the local elections, and that's the most important election there is.
So we all need to get more involved. Well, I have to say, I met you at the Lipstick Lounge. I was there for a comedy show. They were raising funds, and there were other politicians there as well because we were about to have our elections. And that was the first time I had met you. I had heard of you. You're not in my district. And so when you got up there and you were speaking, I was like, oh my, such a powerful woman. And then you went around and you gave people your card. You said, contact me anytime. And you were engaging in conversations with people. And I have never seen anyone do that. And so that was when I was just like, this is such an impressive woman. And so I'm just curious, have you always had that kind of confidence, the ability to work a room? Or is that something that you had to cultivate when you decided that you were going to run for office?
It's me being me,
Mm,
and I have fought very hard to pretend to be somebody I wasn't until
mm,
7 years ago, and I decided to transition. And it's all of me just coming out and finally being able to be me and be able who I am and who I feel and just help people and be there. One of the greatest joys I have of being in politics is being able to communicate and give a voice to anybody who has a need. One of my favorite stories is I was at Nordstrom's with my stylist who had some clothes set out, and I go there. And if you ever get that opportunity to have a stylist at Nordstrom's, go, because then you just call them. They have everything set up. It's all in your style. It's all in your size. It's great. And so I was in the dressing room, and my phone rings, and I answer the phone, and it's this lady who was really just outrageously upset about
mm,
Metropolis parking, and that she
mm.
had pulled into the parking lot, and then there was no available spots, and so she had to turn around and leave, and she was charged a minimum of $5. And she was just furious, and she just went on for like 15 minutes, just blah, 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 blah. Need to run him out of town and all this kind of stuff. And finally I said, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I said, I'm in a dressing room at Nordstrom's and I don't have anything to write on. If you will send me an email that details the exact time and location of where this incident happened, and I will make sure you get your $5 back. And she said, not only did you answer your phone, you answered your phone in the dressing room and listened to me complain for 15 minutes. I said, well, yes, ma'am, you called. And I answered. And she was like, okay, I'll send you an email. Of course, I never have heard from that lady ever again. And so she never got her $5 because she never sent me her address, which I was just going to pay. But it's the thing that I enjoy the most. It's the little bitty things that when you have somebody calls and says, hey, I've got a street light that's out, and you have pick up the phone and you call the department, and they have somebody go out there that afternoon and take care of it, and they send you a text the next day when the street light's on. You're like, Olivia, it's on. Those are the things that matter the most to me, and it's how all politicians should be. But it's what I enjoy. I'm retired from Vanderbilt, and so all I do is politics, and I absolutely have a blast.
Well, it was just so obvious that you genuinely cared about people and you genuinely cared about the community and making it better. And it was inspiring to me because it felt like a breath of fresh air. I think we can all get a little bit cynical and jaded about politics and government, and it was really nice.
Thank you.
So, for those who are listening that do not live in the South or do not live in a red state, we're, blue dots. We're a blue dot in a red state. I sometimes when I'm talking to people, they're like, what is happening? They don't fully understand how our state legislatures are really trying to, in many ways, take over those blue dots, those blue cities. So the party who says that they actually want limited government is really trying to ratchet up their government over the cities where they're just offended. And obviously, they're constantly trying to do things to our metro council, and whether it's our airport, our sports, our schools, they really are trying to get involved. And so I would just love if you could share just briefly kind of like where we are and what's at stake in terms of legislatures and trying to kind of impose on cities and councils that really is not their domain.
Well, one of the things that hit home the most with me was the three-star dinner that we have every year, where all the Democrats kind of come together. And it was year before last, and Justin Jones was speaking, and he got up and he spoke, and he said something that I just carry it with me, and it's one of the things I kind of use to kind of keep me going. And he said, "A dying mule always kicks the hardest." And I
Mm,
believe that that's exactly what's going on with the Republican Party in the South. When someone like me could run a race and win in a red state with 22 opponents, I think that that's a sign that things are changing. And they can't stand that. It bothers
mm,
them and it upsets them. And so they throw mud at everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. And whatever sticks, they'll try to cultivate that and try to do that again. And the fact of the matter is they're losing grip, they're losing control, and they can't stand it. And it just causes them to be irrational and throw things. So um, all I can say is things are changing. If you look at the city council in Nashville, and the fact that I won is huge and historic. And then if you look at our city council and know that we now have a majority of women, the first time in history, that's huge. It shows you where voting is going. Um,
yes.
I think that it won't be long and we'll flip this state blue.
At least I was going to say, at least in our blue dots. I don't always have as much faith when we go outside of the dots or the cities,
That's
partly
all I've
because
got to
maybe
live
I
off
grew up
of.
in a small town. But I love to hear your spirit and that things are changing. For those throughout the country, whether they're in the LGBTQ community or the Black community, so many communities right now that are being actively oppressed. Um, what would you say to them if they are losing hope? What would you recommend that they do?
One of the things that I have my own business as a public speaker, and I travel around, and one of the things that I tell folks is, have you ever snuck up behind somebody and tried to scare them? And when you did, what kind of reaction did that give to you? The more reaction they had, the better it made you feel joyful that you were able to scare them. And when you sneak up behind somebody and scare them, and they don't move, and they turn around, look at you and say, "Well, you're just trying to scare me." How does that make you feel? It kind of makes you feel like, oh, maybe a little less than, and like you kind of failed at doing that. And that's exactly how a bully feels. And
Mm,
so when a bully says something mean and hateful, they want a reaction. They want people to be mean and hateful and upset and blow a gasket and just be outrageous. And when you turn and look at them and say, I'm so sorry, honey. Us grown-ups were talking. Were you trying to upset me? I tell you what, I'll stop talking to them and I'll listen to you, and you give me your best hateful stuff, and I'll pretend like I'm really angry so that you'll feel better, and us as grown-ups can go back to talking. And all of a sudden they're all upset and they're furious and they storm off, and what you did is you completely diffused it. And it's that way everywhere. And we just have to understand that things are going to come around and things are going to change. I firmly believe that the administration that's there now is drunk on power, and the midterms are coming, and a lot of Republicans are going to go like, hey, w- we got to jump ship and turn this thing around, or we're going to lose it all. And
yeah.
if they don't, and they go all in, then we will be able to win some really big key states, some big key seats, and we'll be able to stop everything. And he'll become lame duck, and we'll be able to move right through this. And suddenly he will be a history that we all just laugh at and go, I'm glad we made it through that. And that's all I've got to go on, because if you go on what's in the news every day, you just end up mad.
Yeah, it's in so many ways it's just internal poison. Um, but it is, yeah, hard to let go sometimes. I love your view on that. So you were talking about your speaking. What kind of speaking do you do? What are your favorite topics to go in and talk about?
It's kind of twofold. I really normally speak about women's rights. But at the same time, I'm speaking about women's rights, I'm talking about trans rights, because so many people don't understand the journey of a trans person and what all the things that we go through. In a real short thing, the first 2 years I was on estrogen, I shrunk an inch and a half because the disc in between the vertebrae are less on a woman than they are on a man. My skin is thinner, so I cut easier, I bruise easier. My pores are smaller, so I sweat less because I sweat less. I have drier skins, have to moisturize all the time. I lost every bit of my upper body strength within the first 3 or 4 months. If for some reason I only put on weight right here in the hips, thigh, buttocks area, my red blood cell count's about 60% of what it used to be. My lung capacity is about three-fourths of what it used to be. I lost muscle mass so my entire body. But the two things that are my bookends that rocked my world are the loss of my white male privilege that I had no idea that I possessed, and the other is the female brain. And people kind of look at me funny, and I'm like, people believe that women are born with women's brains and men are born with men's brains, and we're just not. We all have a brain, and it reacts based on the hormones that's there. Because 2 years on estrogen, I went to an endocrinologist, and she said, Olivia, how's everything going? I said, no, ma'am, not good. And she's like, really? Most people, once they've had all their surgeries, they've been on estrogen for a couple of years, they're usually in a pretty good space. And I said, no, ma'am. And she's like, well, what's going on? I said, I think there's something wrong with my brain. And she's like, what? I said, I think there's something wrong with my brain. And she said, explain that to me. I said, well, I used to look at this cup and think of this cup and nothing but this cup. And now I look at this cup and realize I really wish I'd have filled that up before I get here and sat down, because I hope I don't run out of water. You think Julie thinks I think she's fat? Because yesterday I said her jeans were tight, but I meant they were tight because she looked good, not because she's fat. You know, she met that new guy, Mark, online, but I don't like him, but she's my best friend. So yeah, I did pay the insurance payment. So anyway, so I was saying, and so she starts laughing at me, and I was like, why are you laughing at me? And she said, it's female multitasking. It's what women do. It's why women are smarter than men. I'm like, are you are you telling me this never shuts off? And she said, no, honey, ever. It's been the hardest part of my transition is to go from thinking of absolutely nothing to thinking of four things at one time. And when I tell people, especially women, that when a man says, you ask him what he's thinking and he says nothing, it really probably is nothing. It is the most blissful place in the world to go that I no longer can go. But a man can sit and look at a wall and think of absolutely positively nothing and still breathe. As women, if we get down to two or three things, we're doing good. But so I love to talk to folks about women. It seems very validating for women. It seems to be able to help couples. It helps men kind of understand their wives a little better. It helps their wives kind of understand the men a little bit better. And you know, I love to say that, because so many people just see trans women as just drag queens, just men in wigs, and they don't understand all the things that happen to us in our bodies and all the things that change. And so I love to educate people on that. And I love to watch that light bulb go on. And I love to have younger girls come up to me and say, thank you for saying that about the brain. I thought it was just me. I was like, no, honey, it's all women. All women do this. And so
That
I
is
just
so
love it.
fascinating. Yes. Well, I you don't know this, but Olivia, I had an adrenal tumor that I was struggling with for a few years, and it created all kinds of hormonal issues. And I kept saying my brain was gone. But I do think, like, it just goes to the point that for those of us who, I mean, I get some women are going to experience it when they go through menopause or whatever else, but I just think there's so much that, everyday people, we don't really know about the brain and hormones and how it works.
Right.
And having access to that, I think that is such a fascinating thing. And I would like to believe that, so, you live here, so you saw the same things that I saw in terms of ads for both the presidential campaign and the Senate races, where it seemed like here everything was focused. There were two attacks. There were attacks on trans people and there were attacks on China. Like those were the two attacks. And I'm just always so curious. I'm like, do they even know a single trans person? Do
Most
they
don't.
know what that journey is like? Do they know what that life like? I just feel like so many people like we're turning trans people into this monster that we don't understand, as opposed to a human that actually has a lot to teach us.
Yeah. It's one of the things why I speak so much because um it's representation. And
Mm,
it matters so much. And it's education because a lot of times when I meet people, I'm the very first trans person they've ever met in person, in public. And I always try to have the attitude of ask me anything you want. Because if you ask me something and I explain it to you and you learn something, then and you go back to your little family pod, your partner, your kids, your best friend, and you explain that to them, then it's much more believable to them coming from you than it is from me. And
mm,
so when I talk to a crowd of, say, 300 people, and each one of those 300 people go home and tell their partner, spouse, now I've just told the same thing to 900 people. And those 900 people believe it much more from the 300 people that were in the room than hearing it from me because they don't know me. That person is credible. And so suddenly the knowledge starts to get out and the education gets out. And so, it's just like the whole athlete thing. And gosh, the very first thing that happened to me, I lost all my upper body strength. In fact, I kid my endocrinologist every once in a while. I was like, are you sure you're giving me estrogen or you giving me Red Bull? Because now I got these stupid wings down here. And so it's just so much of my body has changed and people just don't understand. And once they have an opportunity to sit and listen, it's like, I had no idea.
yeah, there just seems to be so much misinformation, whether that's lack of information or truly misinformation, as well as just trying to stoke fears. And I do agree. I feel like, I mean, I know trans people that I knew them for a while, but did not know that they were actually trans until they told me. And that's the other piece. It's like you may actually know trans people, you just don't know that they're trans.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I push so hard is because I've noticed that with the trans community is most trans person people either take path one or path two. And if they're fortunate enough to be able to have their surgeries and get on the right dose of hormones and their body changes the way it's supposed to change and they become what we all in society call passable, then they just blend in and they don't tell anybody. They don't tell anybody that they're trans. And the only person that knows is that they're really, really close friends, people that they trust, and their partner. And that's it.
Mhm.
And then you have the other group of people that maybe they haven't been fortunate. Maybe they don't have insurance and they're buying their hormones from some place online that may or may not be coming even from the United States and they're not using the right dosage or whatnot. And they never become passable and they get a
Mhm.
lot of hate. And so what they do is they pigeonhole themselves into this little corner with other people that have had the same situation and then they just create this mess because they complain about their life and the other person complains about their life and it just ends up this big ball and then they just pigeonhole themselves and they're scared of society because society is so mean to them. And so there's very
Mhm.
few trans people that are out just saying like, hey, I'm happy, I'm trans, and I'm just moving through life. And so it's the question I get asked the most out of everything, other than have I had the surgery, is why do you keep telling people you're trans? Why don't you just blend? And it's representation. For the very first time in the state of Tennessee, kids can turn their TV on and say, I can be what I see. I
Mhm.
don't tell anybody who I am. I just look like some other white woman.
There's often conversation around why do newspaper articles or whatever else say like women CEOs, women lawyers, as opposed to just lawyers. And I get the point, and we're not there yet.
No.
And it does matter when you are a woman CEO and a woman lawyer, when there are so few in that role, at the top, calling it, saying what it is, so that children and others who are trying to get there, um, I do think that it matters. I mean, I don't know about you, but I would love to get to a place, whether it's in our lifetimes or somewhere else, where there is true equality and that no longer matters. But for me, at least, that's not where we are right now.
No, and we're not close. I think we're headed kind of in the right direction, but it's stuff that I put in my, and I just finished my book like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's me and my journey through my life, but I put a chapter head at the beginning of each one that kind of describes that chapter and that time. Like when I was 10 years old in 1975, my mom bought her first house because my mother was a single mom. My dad left when I was a year and a half old, and mom bought our first house in 1975. She bought it in 1975 because until the end of 1974, it was illegal for women to have credit without a man's signature.
Hmm.
And a lot of people act like that. No, that was back in like 1800s or no, it was in my lifetime. It wasn't until 1988 that it was legal for a woman to have a business loan without a man's signature. And
Yeah.
there's so many of these things that I put in there that people act like was like many, many moons ago. My grandmother was alive when it was not legal for women to vote.
Hmm.
And it's just amazing to me how many people act like that's just ancient history and it was just around the corner and we've got so far to go, even though we've come a long ways.
Yeah. I just did the last week's episode was a bit of a history lesson on women in law, with judges and in law firms and that kind of thing. And it very similar. It's like we think that that was so long ago, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't. Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they graduated top of their classes and could not get jobs by law firms because they were women.
Right.
And so when we think of it like that, that was just yesterday. And I think it does go to show how I hate to use the word fragile, but when things are new, they are a little bit more fragile in terms of just taking them for granted and assuming that they'll always be there, and just how important it is that we have to continue to fight for these rights, and so that they are not chipped away at, which is what is actively, you know, happening. And someone would like for them to go completely away.
It's another thing that I've had to try to learn, and in my transition I've had to try to unlearn as much as
Mm.
I've had to try to learn from how to sit, walk, talk, and act and be. I've had to unlearn a lot of things too. And everybody's told me my whole life, pound your hand on the desk. People will think you're weak if you don't. They'll step all over you. Be loud and be bold, or they'll think you're weak. And now folks look at me and like, "Shh, we'll get to you in a minute, Olivia." And I've had to learn to try to make myself smaller. And it's so hard. It's so hard when you've been on the other side to do that. And it's what we have to do as women to be able to fit in because it, I don't want to get too deep into this this rabbit hole, but I've received all of the things that happen to women, and so I've had all the misogyny and I've had the touches and the grabs and the sweetheart, are you okay? You'd be pretty if you smile and so many other things that go along with that I looked at 10 years ago and like, does that really happen? And it does really happen. And so that's why it hit me so hard because I had no idea. It was just one of those things that people just talk about and I mean, does that really happen? And so that's why I try to be loud about it.
Because you've had both lived experiences. So I think that is so powerful, and we can learn so much from you. We cannot wait to buy your book. So everyone's going to send good vibes your way for that to get picked up and it to get published and us be able to read it really, really soon. For those who would like to follow along in your journey, learn more about you, support you, what is the best way for them to do that?
All of my socials are Olivia Hill 247 because I'm me 24/7. And so my Facebook, my Instagram, my LinkedIn, my Blue Sky, TikTok, all of it is all Olivia Hill 247. I've got approximately 68,000 followers between all of it. I try to make a post about every day. And I put on things that going on in my political life and going on with me and my personal life and I try to never post anything that's a funny meme or anything. Everything that I write is something that I wrote and that I is something meaningful to me and things that I do, things going on in politics, things are going on in national politics and local and abroad. and where I'm speaking and what things are going. So it's the best way to keep it is on any socials. Olivia Hill 247.
I love it. And we will put that in the show notes. I know I immediately connected with you on Instagram after I met you at Lipstick Lounge, and I love your account. It's always very inspirational. I learn a lot. So everyone go follow Olivia. Go get involved in your local politics, vote and run, take up space. Any last words before we part, Olivia?
Women belong in every single room.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Okay, everyone, have a great week, and we will see you back here next Tuesday.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me for this week's podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, give the episode a like and leave a comment below so we can keep the conversation going. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a future episode or announcement. Listening on Apple, Spotify, or another podcast app? You can watch the video and join in the after show conversation by visiting hustleandflowpodcast.com.